Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Schmoes Show. I'm Mr. Ryan, and I'm a Schmo.
And I'm Kyle. And I'm Schmo.
Sorry, these are my hands, not Kyral's hands. I couldn't time it right. There we go. Welcome to the Two Schmoes Show. It's been a week, hasn't it, Mr. Kyril?
It's been a doozy.
Anything eventful happen for you?
I got a cheap cake at Meijer.
Oh, cheap cakes are the
That was
best.
nice.
Yeah.
Left day old Memorial Day cakes for a bunch off. I went back the next day to see if I could get another one and like freeze it until the 4th of July because it's just a red, white, and blue iced cake. It'd be perfectly on theme, but no. I think they tossed them.
Commies.
Yeah.
Is Peter Meyer still in Congress?
Probably. I don't know. We should probably know.
We should know. I think that's a little pertinent to us.
Michigan Congress members. Are these just... Sure, why not?
I think he's former. Okay.
Yes, okay. I think this one is not quite what I'm looking for. Where is... Because it keeps pulling up, like, the state representatives. Yeah. Anywho.
Big Google's trying to hide our Congress people from us.
They are. Google's been having a rough week, honestly. I guess that's something we can go into in a bit later. But the big news, because there's no real point trying to joke around and dodge around it, I don't think. Former President Trump is now convicted felon Donald Trump in the state of New York.
Current felon Donald Trump.
Current felon.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it. I had seen the same thing where it's just going to be so far with Trump's conviction on 34 counts. It brings the average number of felonies per president to something like 0.75, which is pretty hilarious.
That's a lot of war crimes.
Oh, what's the copy pasta? Give me one sec.
Yeah.
The average president commits three crimes a year. This factoid is actually just a statistical error. The average president commits 0 crimes per year. Crimes Trump, who lives in New York and eats over 10,000 crimes per day, is an outlier and should not have been counted.
Oh my god.
That's what that reminds me of.
That's really good. Ugh. How was your Memorial Day? Did you remember to celebrate it?
Kind of. I met up with my family earlier, not the day of. But yeah, otherwise, just kind of chilled out a bit. Did you do anything in particular?
Not really. I went to my mother's for food.
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing says Memorial Day like a homemade meal for mommy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I had a dream last night that we all got to celebrate a second Memorial Day because we forgot the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Tragic.
Truly. So,
Yo.
I'm just going to read this off of Wikipedia because it seems, I mean, what was it? Satan works hard, but the Wikipedia editors work harder.
Okay.
It's been a bit of a firestorm on the Trump Wikipedia page this week with things getting changed and updated and whatever. And they've actually changed the header on the Trump Wikipedia page because previously, I don't know if I said, somebody had changed it to say that Donald John Trump is an American politician, media personality, businessman, and convicted felon. and that has since been changed because it is, while completely accurate, kind of against the purpose of Wikipedia in having it phrased in that way. But in the time since, they have added a section to his post presidency time period under the subheading of investigations, criminal indictments, and convictions, civil lawsuits, because that needs its own whole fucking category,
Of
for the
course.
criminal conviction in Stormy Daniels' hush money case. So let's just go through it because this is a pretty concise summary.
Please.
During the 2016 presidential election campaign, American Media Incorporated, publisher of the National Enquirer, and a company set up by Michael Cohen, paid Playboy model Karen McDougal and adult film actress Stormy Daniels for keeping silent about their alleged affairs with Trump between 2006 and 2007. Cohen pleaded guilty in 2018 to breaking campaign finance laws, saying he had arranged both payments at Trump's direction to influence the presidential election. Trump denied the affairs and claimed he was not aware of Cohen's payments to Daniels, but he reimbursed him he reimbursed him in 2017. Federal prosecutors asserted that Trump had been involved in discussions regarding non-disclosure payments as early as 2014. Court documents showed that the FBI believed Trump was directly involved in the payments to Daniels based on calls he had with Cohen in October of 2016. Federal prosecutors closed their investigation in 2019, but in 2021, the New York State Attorney General's Office and Manhattan District Attorney's Office opened a criminal investigation into Trump's business activities. The Manhattan DA's office subpoenaed the Trump Organization and AMI for records related to the payments and Trump and the Trump Organization for 8 years of tax returns. In March 2023, a New York grand jury indicted Trump on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to book the hush money payments to Daniels as business expenses. And on May 30th, 2024, following a 5-week trial, a jury convicted Trump on all 34 counts, with sentencing set for July 11th.
Ooh. That's a month away.
That's a while. I mean, it's not. I say it's a while. In like normal human terms, that's a while. In court terms, that's kind of surprisingly quick.
Can we go
Feels too
over
long,
each
though.
charge?
Well, I mean, so that's the thing though, is that they're all the same.
Are they?
They're
I,
all. It's 34 counts of falsifying business records.
damn. Never mind then.
It's not nearly as amusing as the. Excuse me. As the Mar-a-Lago documents case, where there's like a whole bunch of different things to go through in the indictment and all that.
Mhm.
And we've actually had some expected, but still pretty fucking depressing updates on that we'll go through in a little bit here later. But for this one, yeah, it was just 34 counts of falsification of business records.
That's sad. I was
So
really
yeah,
hoping there was some
here's the
twist to
breakdown
it.
of them.
Yeah.
11 of the counts are related to invoices sent by Michael Cohen. 11 of them are related to checks that were written fraudulently, and 12 of them are related to ledger entries, presumably of those payments.
Could you imagine being the Wikipedia editors who were getting the pages ready to like put in those charges as soon as it came out?
Yeah, I'm curious here. So there is an entire page for the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York.
Oh shit.
But yeah, this. So here, I guess this is a bit more specific. The indictment charged Trump with 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree in violation of New York Penal Law 175.10. Each count is related to a specific business document, each having a date ranging from February 14th through December 5th, 2017. 11 are for invoices from Michael Cohen, 9 are for general ledger entries for Donald Trump, 9 are for checks from Donald Trump, 3 for general ledger entries from the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust, and 2 for checks from the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that kind of surprises me is that none of the hush money part of it is illegal. It's just the fact that they tried to hide the payments as like a political move. It's wild.
They played the game just slightly wrong, and it cost them everything.
Yeah. Big like Al Capone getting dinged for tax fraud vibes.
Seriously, that's just kind of funny. That being said, to our accountant for the Two Schmoes Show, please take a lesson from this.
Mm-hmm.
I will not go to jail over this.
I'm not sure, like, what else is there. I guess we can go through, uh, like, sentencing, because that's
Yeah.
the next step for it, of course. Um, I'm curious. What is your expectations for what sentencing will happen?
Fuck. That's a hard count because it's a blue collar crime all together, right?
Yes. Oh yeah.
So
Extremely.
I'm expecting just a month in a retirement community that's called the prison,
Mm.
and that's it.
So I there is two very distinct ways that this could go.
Okay.
If Trump had participated in the trial in good faith, hadn't been required to have multiple gag orders issued against him for threatening the judge, the judge's children, the prosecution, various witnesses, and various other people related to the court case, like court clerks and so on. If none of that had happened, I think every expectation would be that this would probably be just financial penalties,
Okay,
fines
fair.
only, because that's typical for these types of crimes, even though they're penalties, or even though they're felonies. Is that because they are purely financial crimes, the punishment for them, and it's obviously extremely white collar, is also generally just financial.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because there's so many of them, you can sprinkle in a little bit of like community service or something along with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in has Trump, who did directly attack the judge, the judge's daughter, the judge's clerk, the prosecution, and multiple witnesses at various stages of this trial, and then has continued after the conclusion of the trial to do that even more so.
Yeah.
And to say that Trump has not demonstrated remorse for these crimes would be the grossest of understatements. He still refuses to acknowledge that the verdict is in any way legitimate. And it's gone so far as to have, other Republican figures go make fools of themselves in defense of him because they have to toe the party line, and the party line is Trump now. And we'll get to that because there's one notable one that's pretty fucking despicable that is worth mentioning. But given that, I it's tricky because Judge Merchan
Yeah.
has already been far more lenient with Trump than I think they would be with any other criminal defendant.
Well, you got to give him some credit because, like, this is a very political case.
Yeah,
Yeah. You got to handle
but
it differently because, like, you don't want to give him a single inch.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that because this is a state prosecution, in my opinion, he should have treated it like any other state prosecution, and
I
he
agree.
failed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am hopeful that because there are so many extenuating circumstances, and particularly that those extenuating circumstances relate to overt threats made against the judge and his family, and that there is zero evidence of remorse from the defendant, that Merchan will issue some amount of jail time for the charges. Like, even if that is the case, I'd expect it to be less than a year.
Mm.
And given that these are state charges, I don't. it's tricky, like what kind of prison would they go to, because it's obviously not going to be a cushy federal prison kind of thing because it's a state prison.
Hmm.
Maybe, so I guess maybe this would be the compromise where you say it's like 34 months, one for each charge, house arrest, say, with exceptions made between now and November to allow for the fair execution of the election. But otherwise, and the Trump in that case would have to make explicit requests for permission to attend political events, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, house arrest, which, is far better than he deserves, but would still drive him absolutely fucking insane.
Well, which house does he get arrested to?
So it would have to be in New York. One
Okay.
of his properties in New York, probably the upstate one that Letitia James is threatening to steal. Not steal, but, claim as in lieu of him actually paying his fucking taxes.
What if he does lose the property while he's under house arrest? Does he get bought with the property?
I don't think so. He would probably just be forced to move.
That's just Donnie. He comes with the property. He's going to be out of here in like 3 weeks when his house arrest is over.
Something else that could be very interesting to see, because obviously he owns property in Florida,
Hmm.
would be if he is sentenced to some amount of jail time within the state of New York, if he just refuses to go back to New York at that point to avoid it, a la like Rudy Giuliani,
Yeah.
just hides in Florida or, not New York or a state friendly to New York for the rest of his life. But I don't know. It's gonna be very interesting to see, and I don't know. I'm not overly optimistic. My genuine expectation is that there's only going to be fines issued because it's going to be the same thing that Merchan has been leaning on before, in particular with the gag order violations. Even though Merchan issued, warnings to say, "Hey, stop defaming specific person," and then Trump would just switch to defaming another person who's not that, and
Hmm.
Merchan would be like, "Hey, don't do that again. Don't do that." He did it like 3 times, where it's like, "Well, he technically didn't violate the first gag order, so I'm going to put a different one in place," and I would not be surprised if they do that, where it's like, well, this is the first time that he's been convicted of a felony, even though we know he's done it many, many other times and is probably going to be convicted further in the future. He's a first time offender, so we're going to do what we normally do for that. That's what I expect.
Damn. Too bad
What
this is like the.
those kinds of fines actually end up being, though, could still be incredibly difficult for Trump to make payments on. So even if that does end up being the case, I wouldn't hold out all hope because Trump is very quickly racking up a lot of debt. And even though he's come into a sort of windfall
Mhm.
with what I'm still shocked is not illegal handling of the Trump media public, offering.
Yeah.
Uh, Sorry, I deafened myself there. It's still not trivial to convert those stocks into cash in a conventional way. It's not like how Elon or Jeff Bezos can leverage their stocks into loans, right?
Hmm.
Because Trump's fraudulent loan activity is what put him in this place. It's not going to be nearly as trivial. And if you're a bank, you should also be extremely skeptical of why the value of Trump's media stocks are what they are, given the context of the underlying company. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have a. I have a game for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree with you now that you present those fines.
Mm-hmm.
What batshit insane merchandise will come out of this for Donald Trump?
If there is even a day of jail time, they will 100% make Trump jumpsuits.
Yo!
No doubt.
I like what you're thinking. I like it. Oh, that's so funny.
Hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if they also just try to generally co-opt the 34 in general.
45, 34, something like that.
Something like that. I'm sure it'll be a dog whistle for decades to come.
Trump rules 34?
I was gonna say, and that is where it becomes our job to make sure that whenever somebody Googles the word Trump and 34, it is the most heinous, most disgusting pornography available on the face of the internet.
I know a couple artists. Give me some
The
time.
the bigots cannot win. We will be filthier.
God. So what you do, right, is that you have Trump in this this pornography. It's always got to be gay, right? Because obviously they're homophobic,
Absolutely,
and it's
yes,
always got to be a person of color.
yes,
Yes.
and it cannot ever be incestuous because they like that apparently, or Trump does at least.
Yes.
I will say though, this is a nice segue into another story. With the Google basically leaking all of their SEO, we might be able to juice it a bit and get it up there. I do think an important thing though is that you can't take it too far. If you take it far enough that safe search kicks in, it defeats the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to toe that line.
So,
Rin
okay.
Rin has been sleeping all morning, and of course now is when she decides she wants to play and be loud.
Hi, Rin. Welcome to the Two Schmoes Show. Are you a schmo?
She do be.
She do?
She do be Dushmo.
Oh, very
Well,
good. Very good.
try to find. Yeah,
Houdini is currently in our bedroom sleeping at the moment.
nice.
This cat is driving me insane because he realizes, right, that
Hmm.
he can scratch our furniture in the middle of the night, and that wakes
Hmm.
me up, and whenever he wants something, he does so. I've become my cat's bitch.
That's just how it goes with the cats.
Really is.
For the Google News this week, there was a collection of internal documents from Google that were leaked, I believe, through like a repository like GitHub that have been very quietly confirmed to be real, like kind of in a roundabout way. Google
Okay.
confirmed that they are authentic. And it's pretty awkward for Google because a lot of these documents seem to directly contradict statements that Google has made in the past as to how their search engine optimization works. Where
Really?
Google
Yeah.
will say stuff like, we don't prioritize embedding of certain types of links or articles that are formatted in certain ways when in reality they do.
That's not shocking.
So Google said that what was it they said? We would caution against making inaccurate assumptions about search based on out of context, outdated, or incomplete information. We shared extensive information about how search works and the types of factors that our systems weigh, while also working to protect the integrity of our results from manipulation. And everybody's kind of like, do you really though? Why should we believe you now? Quoting a bit
Uh,
from the Verge's coverage here, the
yeah.
leaked material suggests that Google collects and potentially uses data that company representatives has said does not contribute to ranking web pages in Google search, like clicks, Chrome user data, and more. The 2,500 pages act as a repository of information for Google employees, but it is not clear what pieces of data detailed are actually used to rank search content. The information could be out of date, used strictly for training purposes, or collected but not used for search specifically. The documents also do not reveal how different elements are weighted in search, if at all. But it's a bad look. And in particularly during a time for Google that their place within the search market is at probably the most jeopardy that it has ever been in their history, where for the first time kind of ever, people are questioning whether it's possible to use an alternative at all. And Google as a company is starting to slide down a slippery slope that is very disappointing to see as they what's the name of it? I don't know if it's their current CEO or if it's just a different one of their executives. I want to say it's their current CEO is a graduate of a particular, like, I don't want to say university because that's not quite right, like, group that a
Mackenzie?
yes,
Okay.
the Google CEO is a McKinsey, graduate, and has seems at least to have been the source of many of the larger structural changes at Google that have been deteriorating the experience of using their applications and products for the explicit purpose of short-term gains for Google.
That's the one part of this like era of capitalism I don't understand is
Yep.
like everything is short-term
Mm-hmm.
games nowadays.
Yeah. Like Google had the only game in town for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
And at their own, negligence, they have deteriorated the experience of using their product to such a degree that people are looking for alternatives.
It would be
And
a
it's kind of,
shame. Sorry.
yeah, I would say it's kind of the same story across the board for all of their products.
I can't wait for like the wake up. I think the wake up's coming at this point where Mackenzie as a brand is going to go through the shit it deserves and everybody's going to realize it's all just a confidence game that leads nowhere.
I don't know. I hope that happens someday,
Yeah.
but Wall Street and these large businesses are already just such a gigantic circle jerk in the first place that I don't know what could happen to like we already had the 2008 financial crisis, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What else could happen that would cause that kind of shakeup that doesn't just cause our economy to collapse entirely,
We find out rich
right?
people make for the best kind of hamburger meat and then they start like hunting each other to like make it in like a restaurant business.
I don't know.
I don't know why my mind went there. I'm
Well,
definitely on
it's because it's kind of like one of the only ways that it can happen. It's not wrong.
You're right.
It's either the larger systems that we operate under need to go under like a literal revolution. And there's no signs of there being any large enough interest to cause that to happen. And that's kind of the insidious secret of it, right? Is
Yeah.
that once you exist in the economy long enough, there's an inevitability that your own financial well-being in the long term becomes tied to the, health of the stock market.
I mean, speaking candidly, mine is.
Yeah, well, mine
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to ask the person, would you personally pay $30,000 to evict all of the corporate pieces of shit from you give them that choice,
Mhm.
30 grand or everybody on Wall Street gets fired? I think the result of that poll would be very bleak, but not surprising.
Damn.
Because
I mean, I don't argue. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's about the number that it works out to, right? The average person has like somewhere between like 20 and $80,000 air quotes, in their retirement savings when you look at the 30 to 65-year-old demographic, which makes up the bulk of the population. It's tough.
It is tough. America is a fucked up entity in this planet we live on.
I will say though, and it's kind of a depressing symptom of the state of the current economy. The average savings, or I guess it'd be the savings that the average person has, does. So how would it be? Is that the right way to phrase it? Yeah, the savings that the average person has been trending down, while the average savings per person has remained flat. Right? Does that make
That's really
sense?
fucked up.
But does that make sense how I'm phrasing it?
So the way I interpret that is the money is still there at a constant.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
fluctuated so much that individuals are losing
Yes.
it, and more like what one person loses, another person gains.
Yeah, it's top heavy more
Yeah,
so than ever. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And long term, 20, 30 years, that would probably be what would tip the scales if there was a significant enough portions of the population, particularly, the kinds of people who uh, are never put into a financial position to have retirement savings in the first place.
yeah.
Once they get to the age where they start to think about, like, okay, what am I going to do in 10 years when I'm not 10 years, 20 years when I'm 65, 70 years old and I physically can't work anymore?
You die.
Do you?
You go to the
How?
bingo
So that's the
hall and
question
you
though, is
yeah.
gamble with what money?
No, 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 no. You go to the bingo hall and hang out with people who do have the money, and
Sure.
then you get propagandized into the conservative grift just because that's the only way that you feel you can make money at this point.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's depressing to think about the extremes that our economy would need to reach before people would start voluntarily advocating for reform because it would benefit themselves overwhelmingly. And that's the broader trend that we see, is that people by and large support the legislation that benefits them as individuals.
Yeah. Well, I
And
also
until
argue. Sorry.
yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah. I argue, and this is one of the most fucked up things I feel. There's an ignorance tax on people
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, where if you are just not politically involved, because I think there's an incentive to being politically involved. Because like if you do get into your
Mm-hmm.
local economy, you do get that little more influence of power, and that does trickle back a little bit more to you. But like you have people who just do not understand like insurance, financial stuff,
Mm-hmm.
savings accounts, bonds, and all that, where they're actively losing out on opportunity just from their own inability to say, I like that or I have an opinion on that. And you
Yep.
have like more, like, even like crypto was a big example of like the ignorance tax
Mm-hmm.
because your inability to like look at those systems, to acknowledge where you would fit in those systems, ultimately led out on people losing a lot of money, which, as you said in your previous example, just became top heavy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally agree.
yeah. This is all to say, go to fucking school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go to school, and not just go to school. Pay attention in school, because that's a thing that's been coming up lately. Is a lot of people who are just like, well, we were never taught this. And it's like, no, you
You were.
were. You just didn't fucking pay attention.
Oh my god. Did you have a class that you couldn't focus in?
Probably. See, for me, the classes that I had the most difficult part focusing in were like reading and language classes.
Damn.
But I was a strong enough reader outside of that, just in my own time, that I was able to sort of overcompensate for it.
That's funny because those were the only classes I was good at.
Yeah. Well, it's not to say that I wasn't necessarily bad at them. It was
Yeah.
just like, God, I'm fucking bored.
Really? Damn.
Yeah. Like listening, and I guess maybe part of it is because I did a lot of reading on my own, particularly in middle and high school, and having to listen to people who are not as strong of readers as I am try to speak publicly was just like nails on chalkboard. Just like, oh my God, please just get it over with. Do
Oh,
it.
you
Be
know what's
done.
the worst thing ever, right? I think everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say this. Do you know what
Mm.
you know what I mean by a reader's voice?
Mhm.
Fucking hate people who can't like read cohesively, and when they read, they just go. And I'm just picking up a book that's on my desk right now. So, coffee fervor is a spectrum. It's nice to keep that in mind. Somewhere on that spectrum is a line that declares the analyzing, and that analyzing the flavor of coffee is a valid and worthy pursuit. Fucking hate people who I hate the strong word. I am annoyed by a
Yes.
reader's voice.
Yep. Very much agree. And a lot of it does come, especially in like a high school setting, in my opinion, from people who struggle with reading
Yeah,
and are being kind of forced into positions where they aren't comfortable themselves and they're trying to do the best that they can. And it's just, that's just that's the best they can do. But it sure as hell sucks to have to sit there and listen to it also.
oh yeah. Oh shit. Houdini has entered my office.
Mm.
Hey, buddy. Kairo's cat's also causing a mess today. Do you want to come on? Oh, you're such a cute boy. Okay, where was I? Oh, yeah. Reading sucks.
Hmm.
No more reading, ever.
Yeah.
Ban books.
I guess just think because I've never had to really think about it, right?
What, were
Like
your
when was the last
weaknesses?
time I was in high school? No, I don't have any weaknesses. You kidding me?
I'm literally the main character.
I am him. Come on. But no, like from the perspective of being an English language educator,
Yeah.
particularly in middle and high school, I could totally see it being the case where you have students that don't or just like don't know how to ask for the help that they need to, right?
Yeah.
And they just, they do their reading if you only have people do reading on their own in their own time. They do their readings on their own. They don't really get out of it what they should be. And then, homework and tests come around and they do poorly and then they're failing all of a sudden. And you have to dig them out of that hole that they have been put into. Whereas having everybody in the whole class reading, particularly reading aloud at the same time and following along together, lets you very obviously pick out the students who need additional help.
I would argue we should also probably change like the whole landscape of how we kind of teach literacy to kids
Mm-hmm.
because like kids are literate. I am a full believer in that. You have people watching television right now that is like got layers and depth to it, and they
Mm-hmm.
recognize that. They have taste. But like not many people can extrapolate, the themes and ideas of Julius Caesar by fucking Shakespeare when they're in 10th grade because quite frankly they can barely pronounce half the words in there. But you get them like talking about what's a popular anime at the moment? Fucking like One Piece or something like that.
Of course you
They
would.
could probably with that dumbed down, not dumbed down language, but more like it's their language. It's our language. It's an easier language altogether. They can definitely still pick up those literary skills much younger and with probably less of a toothache if you just kind of give in to what they're reading at the moment too, because they have to have an interest in it.
Yeah. The other argument, though, and
Yo,
I guess that comes down to the sort of like the fundamental question of like how do you define literacy, right? Because it's obviously not a binary.
yeah,
Somebody who is capable of recognizing and writing down individual letters would, they can do that. They can, at a very functional, basic level, read something, but I don't think you would necessarily call them literate until they're able to demonstrate something past that, right? That's like literally grade one type fundamentals.
I agree with you.
And a lot of the things that are less fun to read can be important as education tools because they can help to expose areas that people are struggling with by putting them in unfamiliar situations.
You're right, and I should probably preference that my argument is not for the abolition of one for another, as
Mm-hmm.
much as like
Sure.
applying the skills from like a
Mm-hmm.
much easier work and then bringing
Yeah.
that over to something that is going to put some hair on your chest, for lack of a
Mm-hmm.
better metaphor.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah,
We are, in my thoughts, though, coming up on a bit of a precipice
precipice. I love it.
as we deal with the outcomes that pandemic lockdowns
Oh
started.
yeah.
And more so than just that, the I would argue that while the lockdowns and education outside of schools helped to spotlight new struggles that are very acute now, they are not the cause of it, right? And just
Hmm.
sending kids back to schools and learning in person isn't going to actually solve the underlying problems that we have with literacy, frankly.
No, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. It's hard being a kid because like the public education system wants you coming out in a very specific shape and no kid can ever achieve those standards. And the ones that do get those standards were culturally enabled to get them from day one.
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's definitely almost unfair. And I really wish we could change the game.
Yep.
Yeah. And I agree with you. The game was so broken that the moment something came and broke it further, we are definitely going to see a tidal wave of that. I'm really worried about what's good. I don't know. What do you think the most critical age in public schooling is?
In public schooling,
Public
um,
schooling.
so public schooling, I guess we'd be talking about kindergarten being the earliest,
Yeah, I would say
which would be
so.
like about 5 years old.
5 years old. Okay.
So
So
I would say 3 or 4
three or four. So
before public schooling starts
yeah.
is where I don't know. Saying most critical is I disagree with the premise of the question.
You know what? You're right because it's such a vague question. I should have worded that
Yeah.
better.
No, I understand kind of what you mean though, like where if you had to choose, which one do you? And it is probably in early childhood education, I think, almost certainly. Building fundamentals that the children can then use, hopefully, through the rest of their education. But the broader deterioration of our education systems is, a separate but equally valid problem.
Correct. So my argument here is, while you say we are approaching the precipice, I'm going
Hmm.
to start what I'm going to call the collapsing Jenga tower,
Sure.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we are pulling the pandemic has pulled the pieces, and
Yep.
as more people, more students are kind of getting to that capstone age,
Hmm.
the Jenga tower is going to get more and more unstable until we have a class generation that's objectively the worst, which that's a
Yeah.
terrible thing to say, but it's also just kind of the writing on the wall, in my opinion, at least.
It's unfortunate. This New York Times article here. I wish I had a graph. Would be helpful.
What you're looking at.
So this was a publication in the New York Times from October of 2019, talking about declines in reading scores for fourth and eighth grade students who were assessed in half of U.S. states. So prior to the pandemic, in any form in the U.S.
Hmm.
Um, so this is October 2019. America's fourth and eighth graders are losing ground in their ability to read literature and academic texts. 2 out of 3 children did not meet the standards for reading proficiency set by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, a test administered by the National Center for Education Statistics, the research arm of the Department of the Education Department. Reflects the performance of about 600,000 students in reading and math whose scores made up what is called the nation's report card. The average 8th grader's reading score declined in more than half of states compared to 2017, last time the test was given. The average score in 4th grade reading declined in 17 states. Math scores remained relatively flat.
Damn.
Part of the report showed that only 35% of fourth graders were proficient in reading in 2019, down from 37% in 2017. And 34% of eighth graders were proficient in reading, down from 36%. So, like, it's already, from the start, bad, and it's already going down before the pandemic.
If I was from colleges, I'd be very scared right now. Because,
Hmm.
like, the
Yeah.
way I interpret this is those kids, like, if something is not corrected, if they are not, given special attention for all this, I don't think they're necessarily going to want to go to college. And if attendance levels go down, who's going to pay for all the football scholarships?
Well, so that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That I am sure, because it's not necessarily the schools themselves that give a shit on this axis.
Yeah.
I'm sure that banks would be happy to settle illiterate children with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans that they have no chance of ever paying back because they are barely literate in the first place and they won't be able to complete their college education.
Damn.
Do you want to take a guess who the Secretary of Education was when this report was issued?
Betsy.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
And it is just skimming through some of the quotes in here. It's peak DeVos,
is it like?
where it's just like it starts off like kind of like, okay, this is maybe reasonable, and then it goes right off the rails.
Does it go to like an ad for charter schools at the end? Because I feel that's peak Betsy.
Yes.
That's
And credit to the
beautiful.
New York Times for framing this effectively. So, quote, think about the mom or dad who cannot read and so does not read to their own children at bedtime, Miss DeVos said as she released the scores. Think about what that portends for their lifelong learning. Next paragraph. Ms. DeVos dismissed calls, including those from Democratic presidential candidates, to increase school funding to improve the worst performing schools. She has championed programs that allow tax dollars to follow children to the schools of their choice, including private schools, religious schools, and charter schools, and has rejected the view that more money would lift struggling schools.
It's not like studies have proven that the more money you fund to education, the better results you get or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like she's using
No
that same exact
chance.
reasoning to like try to fund charter schools or anything like that.
This is great. This is a quote from Rosa DeLaura, the, I guess now former Democrat representative of Connecticut. I'm actually curious. Are you a current? I want to search Google for Rosa DeLaura. She's still in Congress, still representing Connecticut's third. At this point, don't know if she still is, but she was the chairwoman of the House subcommittee that oversees the Education Department's budget, saying in part of the interviews, rather than exploiting the result of the test to spread lies and promote her privatization agenda, Secretary DeVos should join House Democrats and families across the nation by supporting increased investments in our public education systems.
Is it
Get
really that
her ass,
hard?
Rosa.
Yeah. Ugh.
Never actually got back to it because we got off. I don't know how we got on that education tangent, but I'm glad we did. Um, Getting back to the whole Trump verdict thing.
Sometimes I forget how fucking smart we are on this show and that we can just accidentally go on a tangent like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had a real humdinger of a quote this week from Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Quote,
No.
there's a lot of developments yet to come, but I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented with regard to Trump being charged, convicted, with Trump being convicted of 34 felonies. I think that the justices on the court, I know many of them personally, I think they are deeply concerned about that, as we are, so I think they'll set this straight.
Mike.
There's so much to unpack there.
I don't know. I feel like it's a real nothing burger of a statement on the outside, but then you start like listening a little bit more in there, and you just get like this. I don't know. I don't know how to quite quantify it, but there's a smugness to there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It is
Mike,
also kind of telling that he specifically points out how he knows the justices personally.
that's what I think is like the best smug flex here.
Yeah. It's like, how and why did you know them personally? I could appreciate if you had extensive professional relationships with them, as they are kind of tangentially your colleagues in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
But to say that you know the justices personally and that because of your personal relationships that you have with them, you think that they will set things straight.
I love that phrase, set things straight, as if
Yeah.
there's nothing like we just got off on the wrong foot here.
It's also incredibly telling that he doesn't say why things are wrong.
No. That's the thing though. He's really good at what he does, right? Because like on the outside, nothing burger of a statement. But there's just so much you can go into on this, like that he doesn't admit anything wrong. He doesn't confess to like anything ever going wrong, and still frames it as if they are the morally right choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do want to give a call out here to Axios, who this article I'm reading from is the article I'm reading from. They have another one that they quoted themselves in from earlier in the week, talking about the general Republican response to Trump's conviction. And Zachary Basu, Sophia Kai, authors of this, I don't know which of you did it. Maybe it was a group project here, but they've titled this America's Seething Right. And beautiful, sublime. Thank you for your work. That is exceptional work coming up with that on your part.
There's every once in a while, I like to think that we're all capable of this talent of just finding the right word.
Mm-hmm.
Seething is so good.
It's great. I am also incredibly glad that, and I hope that it pushes into more common vernacular. But mauled and malding is excellent and deserves greater use.
I'll drink to that. It's just mad, but there's an L in it, so you know they're exceptionally upset.
Well, it's a portmanteau of mad and bald.
Oh, really? I never realized the
Yes. Yeah. So
etymology of
that's
that.
that's the malding part of it is you are mad and balding.
Is that etymology or is that more linguistics? I'm going to go with linguistics.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
So do you
Let's
think like
close.
Mike Johnson
Yeah,
knows the
yeah.
justices because they've done like the same rancid shit at parties, they all go to?
Probably.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it I don't know. It's very much the sort of giving the game away kind of thing, right? Where it's just like, well, why does the justices' personal convictions on anything matter? Aren't they supposed to be arbiters of the Constitution and the law? And
No.
obviously not.
The justice system being anything less than opinionated is a failing on itself. And how it's built, been rebuilt.
So from here, I would like to briefly talk about what some of these personal judges have been up to this week because we had a doozy. Do you remember good Democratic Senator Bob Menendez and his Egyptian gold scandal?
How could I forget?
Uh, we had a ruling. I believe it was this week. What day was this? Yesterday. Let me give us a quick skim again because it's been like an hour since I had this before. To recap, last month, trial started with federal prosecutors accusing New Jersey Senator Robert Menendez of having accepted bribes in the form of gold bars in order to help the governments of Egypt and Qatar while he was the top Democrat on the state foreign relations committees. Prosecutors have the gold bars Menendez supposedly received as corrupt payment, a cooperating witness, and text messages that they say showed the senator promising to take votes and other official actions in exchange for bribes.
Fucking what?
Yeah, no. This is literally as slam dunk as it could possibly get.
They have the smoking gun.
They have the actual fucking gold bars. Like, it doesn't get much more explicit than that.
That's just straight up some Scrooge McDuck level bullshit.
But let me see this. So is this last week after Trump's went away? U.S. District Judge Sidney Stein said that he would be barring prosecutors from introducing text messages that the prosecution alleges showed the people who bribed Menendez discussing getting their money's worth from the senator. So they're not going to be allowed to submit the text messages that talk about him getting his money's worth, like getting the fucking bribes, as evidence, because the judge is saying that that speech is protected by the speech and debate clause of the Constitution.
Remember how I said like objectivity is a failing in the justice system?
Yeah. So it's kind of wild, right? This is open and shut. People trying to influence votes by giving money. And there's a chance that this trial could now fail because discussing bribery is legislative action now, and is, I guess, bribery is God, it's it's hard to grapple with how they're trying to phrase this. It doesn't say bribery is the job of our Congress.
I was really going to say bribery is as defined by the bribees.
Part of the Reddit discussion on this on our law, this sums it up very well. Even if the letter of the clause says immunity, it is beyond absurd to claim that receiving bribes, committing acts of physical violence, or other clearly illegal actions are official legislative acts. Yeah, I agree. Um, so we'll have to see how it goes. There's still motion pendings. I imagine there's going to be appeals related over this, but the idea that the speech and debate clause can protect someone in a bribery case is absolutely wild. I I miss the good old days where the speech and debate clause literally applied to speech and or debate that occurred within the walls of the Senate. Wouldn't that be nice?
No. What is bribery if not just a favor being asked for? That sounds like speech to me.
Mm.
Did you think about that, Mr. Kyrol, with your big fancy degrees?
You got me.
Really, if you frame everything as a metaphor, everything should be illegal.
Wow, this is great. So this is the update for it. On Friday, the defense asked Stein, the judge, to bar the government from citing a 2019 email from Menendez to an alleged conspirator in which Menendez attached the text of a bill he sponsored that would likely have benefited Egypt. The defense said that while his sponsoring the measure was unmentioned in the email, the implication of his support meant that introducing it in court would be unconstitutional. So if you're a senator, all you have to do is imply that something is at all related to your job as a congressman, and suddenly it's protected speech, and you can't be, quoted by it. So yeah, love it, love that for you, Bob.
Kyrol, I can't help but feel like you're being a little facetious.
No.
Kyrol, calm down. You're scaring me.
Yeah, this whole thing is just it's like it should be clearly absurd, and it's kind of wild to me that it's like happening at all. That somebody argued, well, this bribery is protected speech because it's a senator talking about the thing that he was bribed to do. Like, because that's what this fundamentally works out as. It's like Egypt goes, "Hey Bob, here's a gold bar to vote this way on this bill," and Bob goes, "I will vote that way on this bill for your gold bar." And that speech can't be introduced as evidence because it's mentioning the case, the proposed legislation. It, it doesn't make sense.
I'm really trying to think about how this can backfire, but it's like,
It
it's so
doesn't make
stupid.
I don't know. So the only possible silver lining on it is that his wife is also being charged in relation to this, and she is not a member of Congress, so she would not be afforded the same protections. But the implication for this, as it relates to other cases of corruption and bribery, are pretty obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so the lesson, if this goes the way that Bob's lawyers want it to, the lesson that gets taken away is not to abstain from committing acts of bribery, it's to not involve your wife in your acts of bribery.
Clarence Thomas, take note.
Yeah. Yeah, Clarence. I do enjoy referring to politicians in particular by only their first names, because even though they'll probably never hear it, I'd like to imagine it kind of just irks them to know that somebody is talking about them in such a casual, passe tone. Clarence.
Clarence. What kind of a name is Clarence anyway?
That dude's like a million years old. It's probably something from like the 30s.
From the 30s. Oh my gosh. Imagine carrying this life in you for 9 months, loving it, and growing so attached to it you could develop postpartum depression, and you name it Clarence.
I did had a horrible thought.
Oh no, what?
I was gonna make a probably one of the worst segues I've ever done.
Go on, come on. Hit me.
I was
Break
gonna
me.
say, speaking of the 30s, Israel, is
That was good.
the
I like that.
Holocaust. Yeah. But yeah, speaking of Israel, big news this week. Biden administration announced a proposed ceasefire plan that was basically the exact same ceasefire plan that was proposed during the Egyptian talks about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But well, maybe we'll get to that in a little bit because I think we did talk about that. How Egypt basically lied to both the Hamas representatives and the Israeli representatives to seemingly intentionally tank the peace talks.
Mm-hmm.
I think we mentioned that. I'm
If not,
almost
we
certain
just did.
in if we didn't, yeah, we have now. That has not been confirmed, to be clear, but by all accounts is what seems likely to have been what happened, because both Israel and Hamas representatives agreed to the proposed, ceasefire agreement and like stages of the plan that it would entail. And then for whatever reason, when the like Egyptian go-betweens started to report back and forth to the sides, the actual details of the plan started to weirdly change, and it was, by all accounts, not proposals by either negotiating party. So yeah, some real fuckery going on there.
That's the worst game of telephone I've ever seen.
Yeah,
You're trying to
and then
find peace in the Middle East, but you can't fucking play a children's game?
yeah. So with that being said, though, the U.S. government has a proposed or has made the details of a proposed ceasefire agreement that, by all accounts so far, Israel and Hamas representatives have given the indication that they would support. And generally, this is as of an hour ago, per the BBC's reporting. If and this is, I guess, kind of the problem with the Biden administration that's been really frustrating to watch is they are incredibly reluctant to say anything at all if it's not a sure thing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I have to imagine that, at least in part, that is the circumstances with this particular case, where like the details of this proposed ceasefire are secret and they haven't been for weeks now. The terms that both sides have been favorable to are, we knew them since the prior attempt that exploded in everyone's faces. The main thing here is just going to be getting everybody to officially sign on to it. And I'm actually curious because I believe it was kind of awkward. The Biden admin pinned the ceasefire plan on Biden's Twitter.
Of course they would.
It's like, of course, yeah, it still is. But it is really easy to get access to it, to read through it. So this is the three-phase proposal for a durable peace in the Middle East. Phase one, a complete ceasefire, which, props to their graphics team having that be pretty blunt is effective and does not leave room for ambiguity. So yeah, phase one, a complete ceasefire. Withdrawal of Israeli forces from populated areas in Gaza. Release of some hostages and some remains of hostages. Palestinian civilians can return to their homes in Gaza, which has had some contention on it. A surge in humanitarian aid. Phase two is a permanent end to hostilities, exchange for the release of remaining living hostages, and Israeli forces withdraw from Gaza entirely. Phase three, major reconstruction plan for Gaza, and final remains of hostages are returned to their families. So the main piece of criticism in this, because I think largely everybody kind of agrees that this is not an unreasonable plan to have laid out,
Hmm.
is the Palestinian civilians can return to their homes in Gaza because the Israeli campaigns in Gaza has largely reduced the homes that did exist to states that are no longer able to be habitated in due to their
Yeah.
either not existing or not being safe to actually enter.
I also feel like one side gives up a lot more material things where one side has to make just keep a promise.
Yeah. Um, what was the other bit on it? Yeah, so we'll get to that one. Because there have been certain members of the Israeli government that are not happy with this and have been vocally not happy. But I want to
They're
mention
never
those
happy.
as a separate piece because the like analysis that I've seen of it seems to indicate that barring some radical change between now and when this would potentially be implemented, everybody involved seems to accept the terms of this agreement for the time being.
I mean, yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
cool.
No,
I would like that.
that would be great. Okay. So here's where we get to the awkward parts.
Oh no.
One of those politicians who has been making this not exactly easy for anybody involved is one prime minister. I think that's how that's pronounced.
Oh no.
So, following the announcement, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted that there will be no permanent ceasefire in Gaza until Hamas's military and government capabilities are destroyed and all hostages are released. The other side of it is that a senior Hamas politician told the BBC when asked for comment that it will go for this deal, quote, if Israel does. So while this is the big one, obviously, that I've seen in news articles and reports, where while Netanyahu has said this and he has a clear personal interest in the hostilities continuing in order to prop up the extreme right Israeli ministers that want him to go even further
Yeah.
than the Israeli government already has, and that keeps him in power. There is skepticism as to whether Netanyahu's comments here have any teeth to them, and even if they do, whether it would actually change the meat of the proposed agreement as it is today. So I've seen this going around. It sounds really bad because it is really bad, but uh, there is legitimate skepticism as to how valid it actually is in terms of damage to a proposed agreement. The other side of it, that is, the real threat to Netanyahu. Two far right Israeli ministers have threatened to quit, and as a result of their quitting, would cause the collapse of the governing coalition if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agrees to the proposed Gaza ceasefire.
Oh my god.
Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itmar Ben Gvir said they were opposed to striking any deal before Hamas was destroyed. Interestingly, though, opposition leader Yair Lapid has pledged to back the government if Netanyahu was to support the ceasefire plan. And that's where kind of the tit for tat comes in, where
Yeah.
because they are a coalition government, if two people of the current coalition say they're out, all it would take would be, one or two new people to come in and be like, no, we want this to happen.
I suppose that's fair.
Uh, The White House, as of today, in a statement, said that it expects Israel to agree to the plan. Quote, "This was an Israeli proposal. We have every expectation that if Hamas agrees to the proposal, as was transmitted to them, an Israeli proposal, then Israel would say yes," per National Security spokesperson John Kirby to ABC News. So, yeah, this plan comes from Israel. It would be not the least characteristic of the negotiations as they have happened, but real fucking shitty of them to all of a sudden back out of the proposal that they themselves created.
I agree, but I also think it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that do be how it do be. In some other news, there's been some interesting progression of escalations, I guess you could say. I guess just it's just progressing with the war in Ukraine.
Oh.
Two aspects of it that are kind of spooky in their own ways. One, spooky is maybe not the right word. Well, I'll just say what they are. The two big things, one more so than the other, is that Russia seems to be the way I heard it described as probing NATO defenses, particularly along their northern borders with the Scandinavian nations, looking for ways to either provoke responses or to incite action from, I believe it's particularly Finland. I actually double check that. I always have trouble keeping like Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Yeah, Finland. It is Finland. They're the ones with the large shared Russian border. Um, so that's been happening. There's not actually been that much to talk about from it. The more interesting, in my opinion, side of it has been the kind of cascading effect of various NATO allies who have been supplying arms to Ukraine, sort of one by one, limiting restrictions on how those arms can be used. I believe it started with Finland and or Poland earlier this week, basically giving like all saying all bets are off for the arms they had given to Ukraine in terms of using them against Russia on Russian soil. Germany followed after and gave a similar statement, but with some more caveats. And arguably the biggest one, 3 days ago, was Biden giving Ukraine permission to carry out limited strikes within Russia using U.S. weapons. And my understanding of this is that this would mean Ukraine could use American munitions to directly target military sites within Russia to make it more difficult for Russia to advance within Ukraine, obviously.
I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah. It is limited to the area around Kharkiv, and Ukraine has not requested permission beyond those areas. But that is one of the major staging areas that Russia is using for their pushes into Ukraine, and allowing Ukraine to target it should cause, significantly hamper Russia's ability to continue to do so. Yeah. We'll have to see how if this actually does have any major impacts on the uh, progression of the war. But given if Ukraine is asking for permission to start commencing limited strikes in a specific area, they probably have good reason to do so. You know.
I imagine so. I'm kind of shocked it's still going on at this point. Like, I'm not, but in a nicer
Sorry, I
world. Yeah.
should mention that France's President Macron has also been a strong advocate for these sorts of tactics, including reducing limitations on French arms as well. So it is, a lot of this is going to have to be looked at in hindsight, hopefully one day when all of this is done. But I do think it's worth pointing out that Macron has been an extremely strong ally of Zelensky and Ukraine over the last couple of months, particularly as nations like Germany and the US have kind of waffled a bit as to how they want to see the war progress.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Last bit that I have, Mexico is voting today, and it's
Yay!
likely that they'll be seeing their first female president.
Yo!
So, I mean, it's good for them, I suppose. It's unfortunately, from the very limited research I've done, doesn't seem like I don't know. Mexico has such a problem with cartels, right?
Yeah.
That neither candidate seems to be particularly strong or taking particularly strong stances in that regard, which is unfortunate to see. But I guess part of that is that Americans need to stop doing meth and heroin and cocaine and fentanyl, etc., etc.
Could I still do my fucking crocodiling?
I don't know. Probably.
I
I
think that's a
feel like you
Russian
should be
drug.
able to. I
Yeah.
mean, you can make drugs everywhere.
Really, Mr. Chemist? How?
Well, you see, oh, what's that? Is that the DEA at my door? I'll have to get back to you.
Tell him I said hi.
I'll give them your best.
Thank you.
The two major candidates, I guess there's technically three major candidates, but the front runners are Claudia Sheinbaum and, oh God, that is a doozy of a first name. I am going to have to search Google for a pronunciation.
Oh shit. Is it really that? Like a
Stochio.
doozy? Stochio.
Do you want to take a guess how that's spelled?
Stochio.
Yeah, exactly. Xochitl Galvez. It's spelled Xochitl.
Oh.
So, and that's the kind of thing where it's like, I give Magic the Gathering credit for it. Exposure to the plane of Ixalan has actually helped me a lot with the Central Mesoamerican name phonetics.
Mm-hmm.
But a name that starts with an X is always going to be like, my English brain is just going to not know how to do it without double checking first. I don't know why. Claudia Sheinbaum, Xochitl Galvez, and the only male candidate currently ahead in the polls, Jorge Alvarez Menes. Good note here from the BBC. The campaign has been
BBC.
overshadowed. The BBC. The campaign has been overshadowed by violent attacks, which the government says has resulted in more than 20 local candidates being killed across Mexico. Though private surveys put the total much greater, closer to 37. So, who could be these future presidents? Sheinbaum is a 61-year-old scientist who served previously as the mayor of Mexico City from 2018 to 2023 and has the backing of the outgoing president Andres Manuel López Obrador. Obrador has been in power since 2018 and cannot run for the office of president again, as under Mexico's constitution, presidents are limited to a single 6-year term. The popular and arguably populist leader has recent polls suggesting that he is overwhelmingly popular, with approval ratings close to 60%, and has thrown his weight behind Steinbaum, who is the part of his Morena party. While many of the promises President López Obrador made upon taking office have remained unfulfilled, his efforts to reduce poverty and help elderly Mexicans have been popular with beneficiaries of those social programs. Having the backing of the president has considerably widened Sheinbaum's base of voters, but has also raised questions about how independent she is of the sometimes overpowering leader. Obrador is a very controversial candidate. I believe John Oliver has had at least one, probably two pieces, particularly around 2018, during the last Mexican presidential election, detailing the controversies that Obrador brings.
I think I remember those.
Yeah. So the Morena Party has boasted about how millions of Mexicans have been lifted out of poverty during the past few years, specifically by doubling of the minimum wage, reducing the amount of poverty within its cities. But economists have pointed out that other factors at play, such as a rise in remittances being sent by Mexicans living abroad to their families and friends at home. The other major candidate is a current senator and businesswoman, Xochitl Galvez. Galvez, also 61 years old, was chosen by a broad coalition of parties who share a desire to put an end to the reign of the Morena Party. She's part of the Strength and Heart for Mexico coalition and has been running sorry, wait, sorry, sorry, the Strength and Heart of Mexico coalition that she is running for have been critical of the rise in violence the country has experienced in the run up to the election. Speaking at her last rally, she told Mexicans that if they voted for her, they would have the bravest president who actually confronts crime.
Damn.
Uh, However, she has provided little detail as to how she would do so, especially with so many of the powerful criminal groups being behind much of the violence which has overtaken the country. She said she would offer better pay to the police and invest more in security in general. And then there's some third guy who's probably not going to win. Polls close at 6 o'clock local time tonight.
I know we have a huge Mexican fan base, so that's really important that we cover that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, one of our two neighbor countries. So a lot of our politics mix up and intertwine one another.
You're quite right. You're right. Who's the best neighbor country? Go.
It's hard to say, I think. In terms of industry, Mexico has been taking some pretty major strides over the last couple of years to promote their ties with the U.S., particularly in automotive spaces. That has been kind of interesting to see, where from like an optics thing, right? You're still having, air quotes, jobs that may have at one point been in the US, no longer or not move back to the US. But it is still nice to see those jobs taking place within the same hemisphere. And it allows for collaboration with American parts manufacturers to provide parts that go into those cars, even though those cars are assembled in Mexico. I know Volkswagen in particular has a very large plant there. That's been kind of interesting to see how that's progressed with parts acquisition, and how, even though it's like not in the U.S., it has obviously been better for the U.S. economy than if it was in, I don't know, fucking China, right? It's the easy one.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I do like Canada a lot. They have poutine.
Okay.
Poutine is good.
I should preface this under less of a political spectrum.
Sure.
Who's got better food?
That's really fucking hard. See, I would normally, because I did just extol the benefits of Canada's poutine, but I do have leftover taco meat in my freezer right now, and I'm planning on having it for dinner, and I'm really looking forward to it.
See.
The problem with Canada is that they don't really have a strong identity of their own. You know,
They're just like
like
us, but more
what's
French.
what's Canadian food?
Poutine.
It's like it's poutine, and even that's kind of arguable. It's not really Canadian food as much as it is like, I don't know. It's tricky. Mexico has a much clearer, obviously, a much clearer cultural identity, and that gives them a lot of points.
You're right.
Did you see? I'm curious. The construction photos of the new bridge that's going in between Detroit and Windsor.
No.
There are some cool pictures that were going around. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Of there's a new bridge going on that is publicly owned, which would be a nice fucking change because the Windsor Bridge that is currently there is a gigantic clusterfuck. But it's privately owned, and the owner of that private bridge sued for years to block the public bridge from going in. But it is just finishing up. I want the new one. And there is a really cool picture that was posted of somebody who was like flying overhead, and they were like one segment away of connecting the sides because they're building it from both sides and meeting in the middle. And it was a very cool picture. I can't quite find it. There's others that are like equally, kind of close-ish. But this was like you could imagine an action movie car like jumping the gap kind of close. It was very close.
That actually appeals to me because I'm going to Windsor for a concert here in a month.
Yeah. But yeah, this is the Detroit Windsor Gordie Howe Bridge. I've got wow, why is this 33 megabytes? Oh my god, it's a gigantic picture. I'm sorry, this is much larger photo than I expected. But it's on its
Oh,
way over.
dude. I hope they
It's
finish that in
like
time.
it's like 8K. It's even closer than this is now. It's literally like a 10-meter gap.
So who's going to make a movie where you jump off this?
I'm curious. It's the Gordie Howe Bridge. When is it expected to go into service? 2025, so not this year.
Damn it.
I imagine there's probably a lot of once the actual bridge is connected, there's going to be more to do for inspections and getting the infrastructure on either end of the bridge ready.
You know, that's fair. I don't want to go on a bridge that hasn't been inspected or they don't know how
Yeah.
much weight it can sustain in a practical situation.
Hmm. It'll be good though. I was really shocked on my trip to Canada last year, I think it was, where we entered Canada in God, what the hell is it called? The northern connection in Sarnia, the Blue Water Bridge, and
Okay.
we got through like literally zero traffic. It was kind of hilarious how non-existent the traffic was getting across there. And on a return trip, just because we were coming from further south, we came across the Ambassador Bridge, and it was a clusterfuck of trying to get back into the state. So anything to lessen up the traffic in Detroit will be very welcome. That's what I got for stories, though.
I think that was a great little segment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really have nothing myself. I was checking to see if I've seen any movies. The closest I've seen is a Jim Henson documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. In that case, I'm the Mr. Ryan, and I'm cool with a short episode.
I'm Cairo. I am too.
And yeah, I'm a little sleepy. Have you ever like feel like when it gets humid and hot out, you get like sleepier?
I, maybe. I'm not sure.
Fair.
I never think about that. I've not made that connection personally, but it could be.
Could be. Okay.